Sean Sullivan, Maine Brewers Guild.
Yep, Maine Brewers Guild. I'm Sean Sullivan. I'm the executive director of the Maine Brewers Guild.
Okay, awesome. And how did this get all put together, and how did it get the guild involved with it? Originally I just saw the is it CEI?
CEI, yeah, Coastal Enterprise Institute. So there's a number of economic development organizations around Maine that are looking to support food cluster industries as well as industries that are growing here in the state, but also contribute to the economic development of our state and potentially helping us to export the Maine brand.
Excellent,
Obviously food and beer are one of those things. So Sam Adams, if you know anything about the history of Sam Adams and their founder, Jim Koch, it's a big company these days.
Yeah.
Really though, at its core, Jim Koch's passion is craft beer, and there's stories about him, paying it forward to craft brewers. So they've gotten involved with this. They've, in fact, organized the Brewing the American Dream, and I think really
Awesome.
The goal is to help grow small brewers grow their businesses. So tonight we're here to meet with a bunch of experts, people who work at breweries today, people who are lawyers and accountants and others who work with brewers, who are these critical aspects of making sure that they can grow their business effectively, that they can run a smooth business, that they can treat their customers well. So whether it's marketing, legal advice, or the nuts and bolts of a recipe, there are people in the room who can help Maine brewers learn how to grow their businesses.
That's
tonight.
awesome.
Yeah.
I'm a big local food advocate. I think it's going to be the thing that could save the Maine economy.
I agree.
But I think we're severely lacking in infrastructure, transportation, storage.
Yeah.
I noticed the Maine beer, was it the
Maine
beer
beer box? Yeah, absolutely.
Can you tell me, you guys are really spearheading it more than other parts of the local food economy.
So the Maine Brewers Guild, we really want to be a model industry for Maine's next economy. And just like you're saying, part of that involves taking a big swing and exporting these products, which are imminently exportable. The truth is, the brand of Maine itself is a brand that any brand manager would kill for, any marketing director would kill for. It has so much value as it is today. So we know that we're 90% of the way there. What we need to do is get the products into the hands of people, but not just the products. We have to convey the experience of Maine. So what we did with the Maine Beer Box is we basically took a refrigerated shipping container, partnered with this Icelandic shipping company that now has its North American headquarters in Maine,
Imskip,
and fabricated 78 draft lines with Maine companies, fabricated 78 draft lines on the side of it, filled it with Maine beer, brought it to Iceland, did Iceland's biggest beer festival, brought it back to Maine with Icelandic beer and Maine beer, and hosted Maine's biggest beer festival. And the whole idea is that our brewers can learn from overseas brewers while also having brewers from around the world look at Maine as a model craft beer industry. So I totally agree. What we're also trying to do is promote the grain growers who are up north as well.
That's more of an emerging market, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Maine is potatoes. Potato growers grow barley as a rotational crop. Barley turns into malt, which is a key ingredient in beer. So there's a big opportunity for not just hipster enclaves in Portland to benefit from craft beer, but in fact every county in the state and these agricultural communities, which frankly have been beaten down over the past years, and these old mill towns, which are struggling to find that anchor tenant on their main street. A lot of time brewers are moving in there. They're creating a new sense of pride for local communities, and it's a great time to be involved in beer.
That's awesome. You got my mind going in a few different directions. So let me start with one. Craft brewing's been expanding. It's 18% of the market now?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I've noticed this phenomenon. I'm a big ecology guy, and especially with craft brewing, collaboration versus competition, and what you described with the beer box thing kind of hits that, where maybe you could talk about why smaller types of businesses, it's better to work together in the face of what might be big monoculture business or whatever.
Absolutely. It's a David versus Goliath thing, right? And our brewers are David these days. I mean, when you can buy barley and hops in these mega quantities, you are getting such a better deal. You are paying so much less. The inputs that go into beer can be so much less of the final cost if you're purchasing at scale. So there are opportunities for our brewers to work together, both from purchasing ingredients and figuring out who are those vendors that are the best, that are providing the best service, but also brewing beers together to draw attention to the industry as a whole. I think what a lot of brewers are finding these days is that whereas we all may have an uncle that loves one specific kind of beer.
Yep.
Craft beer fans love to try a lot of different beers.
Diversity,
So that's one
yeah.
thing that allows this share of stomach can be shared by a lot of different brewers. But as
Okay.
you said, craft beer is 18% of the market. Now that's huge growth from 5 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
But it still means that 82% of the market is big beer.
Yeah.
So if all these Davids can work together to defeat this figurative Goliath here, or at least just aggressively erode market share away from big beer, then that's a positive. And the truth is, if we get more people drinking craft beer, we'll get more people coming to Maine. If
Yeah.
more people come to Maine, that means great things for our whole economy. And what I'm finding is, as breweries open up in these more rural areas around the state, people who haven't had an introduction to craft beer outside of maybe a college student returning home for vacation.
Yeah.
Who wants to really listen to their college kid tell them, what they should be
Yeah.
drinking or not. But when their friend opens up a brewery, or a brewery opens up in their town, and it's the only real business that's opened up, or really, frankly, exists in some of these towns outside of a convenience store or a gas station, they find that it becomes a community gathering hub. They find that the brewers are doing it for all the right reasons, that they're purchasing from local farms. Some of the local farmers and artisans get to start selling their products inside their store, and it
yeah.
creates a little microeconomy within that community that inspires people within the community to support the business. So
Yeah.
whether or not people are fans of beer, they're finding that they're fans of breweries. And then what
Yeah.
inevitably happens is they try the beer, they realize it has more flavor, and all of a sudden they start to explore different craft beer styles, and that brings them to a situation where it does allow us to work collectively to build that market share.
Okay. Could you make a comment on the responsibility of the consumer and how they
Yeah.
can help? Like, that's a
Sure.
huge part.
Yeah.
And maybe even go back to like, what can farmers, producers, entrepreneurs do to encourage the community to get involved with that? Because that really is like
Yeah.
the relationship that keeps it all going.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's a number of things. One, I'd encourage consumers to look into a little bit more about the ingredients that are going to the beer. We have a number of breweries here in Maine that are making commitments to purchase local grain. We're talking about millions
Any
of dollars.
specific ones you
Yeah,
might mention?
Shipyard, Allagash, Rising Tide, Orono Brewing Company, Drum and Grouse Brewery, Lubeck Brewing Company. I mean, a lot of our brewers are buying local ingredients, using those in their beer. It's creating a unique character to the beer. So I encourage consumers to ask about the ingredients, to look into the ingredients that are going into the beer, and find and purchase those beers that are using the local ingredients, because we all know that it has a multiplier effect when you're buying the local
Yeah.
ingredients. At the same time, support your local brewery, go visit your local breweries, explore the different places. It's a great way to check out Maine. I think so many of us love living in the state because there are so many nooks and crannies to explore, and you find yourself in some town you've never been before. Well, these days, chances are there's a brewery in that town, and it
Yeah.
allows you to contribute something as you maybe pass through that town as well.
Excellent.
And then also, if your favorite brewery isn't serving food, ask them to, find the different vendors nearby that are producing food that might be able to be sold in the brewery, or go to the brew pubs or go to the restaurants, ask the restaurateur, what is the local beer.
Okay.
There are a lot of ways to consumers, and we can have a bottom-up approach to driving craft beer. And so often, it only takes just asking a question: what's on tap that's local? Which of your beers is from the nearest brewery? Whatever it might be. There's a lot of ways consumers can make a positive difference.
Awesome. How about people that are in these depressed mill towns, like
Yeah.
most of the state really, like
Yeah.
they not a lot of economic opportunity. What if they're not like the entrepreneur? How can they find people to like get behind if they want to get into a new industry? Is there a way they can help? That's like,
Yeah, that's a great
you
question.
know what I'm trying to get at?
Yeah, what we're finding these days is a lot of small towns are having beer festivals, which is pretty interesting,
Okay.
and using that as a way to bring people to Main Street and realize the potential that may exist that's not being realized, at present.
Yeah.
I think that's one easy opportunity. I think the restaurants in town prioritizing purchasing local is a really important thing that should happen.
Yeah.
I guess the simplest thing I can say is, whether or not you drink beer, keep an open mind to what the beer industry can do for Maine.
Yeah.
This is a product that really represents, I think, a lot of the values. That it's made by hand, by real people.
Yeah.
It's labor intensive, and there's a lot of pride in the final product. And
Keeps
this is
your money in the loop. Like,
absolutely. This is the same thing that people got excited about when they see a ship built in Maine sailed around the world. Well, you can get that same sense of pride for place, with beer. And it's a great time to be involved in this industry the way the beer economy is going.
Any stats of the growth in Maine? Like I used to do content writing, and I remember reading colonial times, there was like a brewery for every 100 people or so. It's like the economic unit of trade at one point, I feel like.
Yeah, we have now surpassed the number of breweries in the country that there were pre-prohibition. I don't know about Maine specifically. We're right about 100. We'll have 100 breweries in Maine, licensed breweries in Maine, before the end of 2017.
Wow.
That's growth from when I started the shop in 2013. There were 43 breweries in the state. Wow. So we've more than doubled. But what's most exciting to me is that they're growing outside of our metro areas as well. Bangor now has a great number of breweries. Bissell Brothers is working on their new brewery, which would be the first one in Piscataquis County, which will then give us
Milo, right?
Yeah, in Milo, which will then give us a brewery in every county in Maine.
Sweet.
The amount of hops under production continues to expand and grow, and our brewers are prioritizing use those hops. The barley we now have 2 malting facilities in the state, which did not exist, 4 years ago even. These are $1 million businesses supporting a huge number of jobs and allowing family farms to pass it on to the next generation.
It's incredible.
So there's a lot of, and it's complementing the existing tourism efforts in the brand of Maine. I think that's what's most exciting too.
I got 2 threads with that. One is it seems to present a new opportunity for farmers themselves to get into, whether it's hops or grains. And then also, I'm partial to the idea that Maine has to take a long-term vision of being like an ecotourism state. Like I don't want to see the state get run down with development. But like, what do they say in like 10, 20 years, 50% of the population will be in cities. Like they're going to want to be able to get a little bit of breathing room.
Absolutely. So a couple of thoughts on that. One, I think what we're finding more and more is people don't just want products, they want those experiences. And so what's cool with the breweries is almost all of them are open to visitors. And it's one thing to drink a beer. It's another thing to literally see the people making it, smell the barley, in the vat, basically smell the brewing process, smell the hops being dry hop, whatever it is, have that 5 senses experience of visiting the space, talking to the people behind the product. And I think Maine and the tourism brand, we've got a huge opportunity to continue to leverage our existing brand and extend it to a new demographic as well. Let's face it, for a long time, Maine's been known for lighthouses and bed and breakfasts. I don't think the average 20, 30 or something year old is looking to spend a weekend in a wallpapered bed and breakfast. And there are very cool bed and breakfasts, and that's not, but some of these small cabin, tiny house, yurt facilities, near a brewery. Airbnb kind of stuff. At the same time, hotels and B&Bs as well. What it's doing is creating a new narrative for Maine to share. And I think that's exciting because Maine needs a new story to tell in a lot of ways to a younger demographic about why people should come to Maine. So if they can come visit some breweries, go fishing, have an adventure outdoors, and have a cool place to sleep at night, I think that meets the market for the 20, 30, 40-something-year-olds out there and represents a good opportunity for Maine.
Awesome. Maybe to wrap it up, just some personal questions. How did you get involved with the Maine Brewers Guild?
Yeah, great question. I'm just the luckiest guy in Maine. I had been running a nonprofit event series that involved putting on events every month with some of our brewers, with some brewers, and when this position became available, I just did everything I could to try and get it. And I also bit the bullet and took it as a part-time job for the first year, a very part-time job, and have since, with the growth of the industry, the organization has grown as well.
That's maybe a lesson that other people could take from this. Giving your time, maybe without necessarily expecting a lot in return when you don't have like the credentials or the history.
I would say just give relentlessly with no expectation of getting it back. And the dirty secret is, giving makes you feel pretty good too. So, and I'd also say, don't think of nonprofits as this one-dimensional type of thing. There are a lot of interesting things that nonprofits do, and you can get involved. And if you're finding yourself not challenged by work, there's great opportunities to get involved in different organizations. And virtually every nonprofit's looking for someone who wants to contribute. So I'd encourage anybody who wants to get involved to reach out to anything they're interested in.
Okay, awesome. Thank you very much, Sean. Michael.